It's time to create our very first shortcode. A shortcode is just a piece of text that a user can paste into their content, and that piece of text will be replaced with different content. The shortcode we're going to create will be very powerful. What we want to do is provide a form that a user can use to submit a recipe. In this part of the course, we'll be taking a look at how to create shortcodes using Ajax, sanitizing HTML, and creating a post dynamically. It's definitely a lot to do, but I assure you, I'll show you every step of the way. Let's take a look at the Shortcodes API Codex page. I provide a link to this page in the resource section of this lecture. Skimming through this page, you can see that the Shortcodes API provides a lot of power to customizing our site. Shortcodes can be used almost like tags. They can have attributes and even content in between. Creating a shortcode is almost similar to using hooks. Inside the main plugin file, under the shortcodes section, we're going to call a function called add shortcode. This function has two parameters, which is the name of the shortcode and the function to call when the shortcode is used. We're going to call this shortcode recipe creator. The function we want to call is our recipe creator shortcode. Let's define this function now. Create a folder called shortcodes inside the includes folder. Now create a file called creator.php and define the function inside here. Make sure to include it from the main plugin file. We're going to simply return a hello world string. We can now use our shortcode. Let's create a page called submit recipe and insert the shortcode. To insert a shortcode, you input the name of the shortcode surrounded by square brackets. Let's add this page to the main menu as well. If we navigate to our page, we'll find hello world outputted. Now that we confirmed the shortcode is working, we can now begin creating the form. Create another file called creatortemplate.php. Open up the file inside the assets/extra/creatortemplate.txt. Copy and paste the code from this text file into our template. There's nothing super special going on here. It's just a regular form using Bootstrap markup. Each input field has an ID attribute we'll be using to grab an input's value later on. You'll notice that I actually haven't enqueued Bootstrap. This is because our theme already uses Bootstrap. It's actually important to enqueue Bootstrap regardless of whether the theme has it or not. It is overkill, but necessary. The only reason I'm not doing it is because this is just an example plugin for this course. I'm not too worried about adding Bootstrap since I already know my theme uses Bootstrap. Let's output this form now. Like before, I'm going to create a variable called creator.html and set its value to the value returned by the file getContents function. I'm going to pass in creatortemplate.php and set its second parameter to true. Then, we're going to simply return this variable. Refresh your page and you should see the form. This form is pretty simple. We don't have any tags or categories or featured images. We're going to keep it to just title, content, and the metadata. I want users to be able to use the TinyMCE editor for editing the content, just like the one in the admin side. Well, WordPress actually provides a handy function for this called WP Editor. Let's use this now. Right after grabbing our template, we'll call the function WP Editor. In the resource section, I provide a link to learn more about this function. This function has three parameters, which is the default content, the ID, and then some additional settings. We want the content to be empty, so we'll pass in an empty string. The ID name is very important. On the Codex page, WordPress tells us to use only lowercase letters or underscores. Otherwise, the editor won't work properly. In that case, I'm going to set the ID to Recipe Content Editor. Let's refresh our page and see the result of this function. Well, this isn't exactly what we wanted. We got the editor, but there are two problems. If you look at the HTML, It's outputted right outside the form. It didn't replace the text area field with the same ID name. This is because the WP editor function actually echoes out the editor right away. We don't want that. We want to add the editor and replace the text area field with that editor. To do this, we need to actually do some hacking. The solution is very simple, and that's using PHP's output buffers. PHP provides a set of functions that allows us to control output, which is what we'll need to make this editor work the way we want it to. You'll see how this works in just a moment. First things first, let's go back to the template and replace this form group with a placeholder called Content Editor. Back inside the shortcode function, we're going to create another function called rGenerateContentEditor. Inside this function, we're going to call the function obstart. This is a PHP function that will grab any content that is outputted. This function will prevent the content from being outputted until you tell it to, or until the page is finished executing. So, if we were to echo out hello world, this actually won't be outputted until the script is finished running. Because of this, we can actually grab the WP editor function and put it right after the output buffer. It's safe to assume that the content editor won't be outputted right away. Create a variable named editor contents and set its value to the value returned by the obgetClean function. This function will grab any content that was outputted before this function was called and return it. The last step is to just return the editor contents variable. So to summarize what's going on in this function, it goes something like this. By calling the obstart function, PHP will create a buffer that will grab any content that is outputted into a buffer. There are various reasons you would want to do this, but we do it because we want to grab the editor and now allow it to be outputted. When we call the editor, this is exactly what happens. It gets stored in that buffer. To grab everything inside the buffer, we use the obgetClean function. Since the editor was stored in a buffer, we don't have to worry about it being outputted. The obgetClean function will also take care of cleaning the output so we don't get two editors. We can now use this function, create a variable named editor.html, and set its value to the value returned by our rGenerateContentEditor function. Using the string replace function, we'll replace the placeholder with the generated editor.html. Let's refresh the page, and you should now see the editor being placed correctly inside the form.